Welcome to the At the Bar podcast powered by Hansen Reynolds. I'm with here as always, my partner Toby Reynolds. I'm Tim Hansen. Today's guest is Omar Shaikh, restaurateur, business consultant, man about town, influencer, and generally good guy.
He talks about all things Milwaukee. He discusses a little bit about how he got into this industry. You and he hit it off a bit on jiu-jitsu and mixed martial arts.
Jiu-jitsu and wine. I'm only a practitioner of one of those.
He's got a much more diverse set of interests than maybe people understand. I mean, he can be characterized as a restaurateur on one hand, but really he's got his hands in a lot of other things, a lot of interests. He even gets into his philosophies on social media a bit, which as a restaurateur, of course, is a double-edged sword. He's got to use it for advertising and marketing, but he's got his reasons why he's not a fan of it overall.
Yeah, we get into the RNC coming to Milwaukee. We talk about the convention center and his role in both of those things.
The importance of kids and family. It's got a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, it's a great episode.
Let's get into it. We've got here today Omar. How did you get to Milwaukee?
I grew up in Milwaukee, and then at the age of 18, I moved out to Los Angeles. Stayed there for about 6-7 years and came back here.
Okay.
What'd you do in LA?
I chased dreams. I wanted to learn martial arts my whole life, and my parents wouldn't let me do it. So the time I turned 18, I went out there and started studying under a family called the Gracie family.
Oh,
Gracie
sure.
Jiu-jitsu.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, yeah.
Yeah, and kind of represented them and chased dreams to be a pro fighter and did a pro fighter and then realized that, brought it back here and realized I couldn't make a living doing it. At the time, the sport wasn't paying a whole lot of money, and sometimes you lose a tooth, and that costs more than you got paid to fight, right? And the rule set was a lot different. Headbutts were allowed. We weren't using gloves. I mean, in the very beginning, it was a lot different than it is today.
Wow.
What year was that?
I came back here in '90. I'd been training, and I had some fights there, and really graduated in '97. So really, it was around that time period where I was. Yeah, and even a little bit past then.
Did you go out to LA knowing that's what you're going to pursue, or did you? Okay, so did you already have a connection to the Gracie family?
No, I went out there just to learn. I wanted to learn kickboxing and things like that. It just so happened to turn out that I moved 1 mile from the Gracie Academy, and so I never heard of it. I remember riding my bike past it, and I went in, and they were offering introductory free lessons. And anyone that follows the sport knows the name Rickson Gracie.
Yeah.
Rickson. You guys are familiar?
Oh, yeah. Well, I used to watch the old school with Hoist Gracie.
So yeah,
where he would just get a 500-pound guy on his he'd go to his back and just heel strike the guy's kidneys for 30 minutes until he finally quit.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that was so. Rickson was his brother who destroyed Hoist. Hoist was nowhere close to being probably middle of the road for the family. I hope he never listens to this. So Rickson was giving free half-an-hour lessons, and so which is unheard of, right? And so went and took a lesson from him and just started training.
That's awesome. I always say, for people who are interested in martial, because I did some boxing and wrestled in high school and stuff, but jiu-jitsu is the best martial art, I think, to learn because it's the most practical thing. I mean, if you start out, if you're going to get in a bar fight or some crazy thing, throw hands, I mean, you're going to break your hand, you're going to get all jacked up. And it takes size out of the equation, too. I mean, a little dude who has good skill can take out a bigger guy without, pulverizing somebody's face. It's kind of, it's a, not a gentle art, I guess, but it is, though. It's a way to disarm.
It is. I think wrestling, too. I mean, that's kind of the foundation of all MMA now is and you're right, Bear Street, I've broken my hand several times, and yeah.
So not that we want to go completely down this rabbit hole, but I don't know about this. What's the history of the Gracie family in LA, and how does that fit with jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so they were in Brazil, and Helio was the grandfather, and he learned from, I think it was Maeda, some Japanese jiu-jitsu legend, and he really took his gentle art of jiu-jitsu and turned it into a real self-defense for streets. I mean, a lot of the Gracies were getting in fights on the streets all the time.
In Brazil or?
In Brazil.
Okay.
And so they had been doing this form of sport for years, right? And then Horion had a dream to take it to America.
Okay.
And form the UFC. And we don't have to talk about the whole history. At one point, one of the senators shut it down, said this is human cockfighting, but there's a lot of money behind it and a lot of politics behind it. They finally made it through.
Do you still stay connected to that world in some way?
I do. I have a lot of friends that are in it. I stopped coaching a long time ago, but I'm friends with some of the fighters, and I've met Dana several times, so he always is very nice to me. And I still watch a lot of the fights.
He runs the UFC. He's the head honcho of that.
He's an awesome guy. I remember the first time he came in town, I was hitting up GMR Marketing. I was hitting up every agency, every hotel, every concierge, saying I want him in my restaurants, right? So I knew one of the executive producers of the UFC. So it just so turns out I was in Brookfield, and I get the call that Dana White's at the sushi restaurant. And I'm like, what? I can't get there in time. So I got there by the time it ended. I comped the bill. I said, look, there's five of you, and I took care of the bill. He goes, what? And left the waitress $1,000. Set us up for a great UFC, or a great, I was taking 8 of the brewers at the time. And there was 10, so it was 10 of us all together, my friend and 8 of the brewers. And Dana's like, oh, Niner, one of the producers, I'm going to set you up cage side. I said, great. So the next day he calls me. He's like, hey, is this fucking Omar? Because that's what Dana, Dana, I'm like, yeah, this is. He goes, you need 8 tomorrow, right? I go, oh no, it's 10, click. And I'm like, what? So I wasn't sure if I just told my friend and I were going to go there. If we don't get in, we don't get in. The brewers are going. And so we get there. They walk us in. There's 8 seats. And I said to my friend, we're going to go watch it from up there. The brewers can sit here. And my friend gets all, a little salty. And I'm like, listen, you got to get in where you fit. You and I are walking out of here. So as we're walking out, Dana laughed, sent the security guard over and walked me over. He had another seat to my friend, but he put me right next to him.
Oh, wow.
Oh, holy cow.
Yeah. And so
was that in Milwaukee or Chicago?
It was in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And then the next time around, he came around and said, hey, I'm coming in for dinner, and then didn't come. And then about 11:30 calls me. He goes, I'm still coming for dinner. I said, what? We closed. All the chefs, I said, well, come on by then. So I called my chefs, gave him cash, came back. He showed up at 1 o'clock.
Wow.
And so I'm still waiting for him. My wife's calling and everything like that. So I greeted him, said hi, comped his dinner, whole dinner for 10 because he just always takes care of me.
So we leaped to a lot of things there. So
Yeah.
You're in LA, you're doing jiu-jitsu, 6 years or so, you said you were out there doing that?
Yeah.
And were you doing other things? Like, how'd you get it? Was that where you
I
found
started working in
hospitality?
restaurants.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's where I got my start. And I finished about 1 semester of school. And so I decided I'd move back here and finish school.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
What was the hospitality thing in LA just to pay the bills sort of
Yeah.
thing, or was that a passion that you had even before going out there?
Just to pay the bills.
Okay.
Front of the house or back of the house?
Front of the house. Yeah.
So taking one step back, you though were born and raised otherwise in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. What part of town? What was?
Grew up in Brown Deer.
Okay.
And then, yeah.
You always sort of a big fan of Milwaukee, or were you one of those guys who grew up here and said, I'm going to get out of there and never come back?
Well, I didn't know anything about Milwaukee, to tell you the truth. Yeah. Growing up here, right? And we barely went downtown. I just remember going on trips and getting dressed up and going to the Grand Avenue Mall.
Yeah.
So I have those memories, right, growing up as a kid and saying, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And sometimes we would go to shows and Brewers games and things of that nature, but I didn't really understand Milwaukee or anything about Milwaukee until I came back here.
Yeah, natives never really fully appreciate where they grow up until they leave and come back.
100%.
I grew up in San Francisco, and I don't know, it was just where I lived. I didn't
You
think
still
anything of it.
appreciate going back to San Francisco
you go back now,
now?
you're like, what the hell, man? This place is unbelievable. But
it's different.
It's different now, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
past 5 or 6 years are
Yeah.
definitely different. But I mean, going back throughout like the 90s and early 2000s, you're just like, it's a...
Tim never saw the Golden Gate Bridge until going back as a tourist.
Well, I never went to Alcatraz until I went back.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure that stuff like that didn't,
Well,
it's not part of
it's
your
a
orbit.
It's a
Right.
tourist thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would you go? It just didn't dawn on us to do that kind of stuff. It was just where we lived. My dad used to, when we were little, he would drive by and he would call it Naughty Island. That's where the naughty kids go. And he goes, the only thing they serve is soup. And the spoons all have holes in them. I'm like, oh shit!
That's where I belong. How do I get there? How do I get to Naughty Island? So anyway, you were out in LA, and then at some point said, I got to kind of put some things together, and I'll go back to Milwaukee to do that.
Yeah, no, I just needed to. I just wasn't getting a whole lot done there, right? And so I knew I needed to come back. Get a degree, and so my family would accept me because I would, they're more educated, and just came back here, and then just went to college at Cardinal Stretch University, graduated from there.
What'd you study?
International business.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I don't really. Yeah. I mean, business wise, like I don't know. University is one thing, and going to school is one thing. Never want to talk anyone out of it, but I don't really apply anything I learned in school for what I'm doing today.
Just like a lawyer.
Yeah, very true.
So what year did you come back to Milwaukee?
90. No, 97.
97, okay.
97, yeah.
And what was your first foray then into the hospitality industry in Milwaukee?
Yeah, so I mean, just remember the first one was well, I worked in a couple different companies and did well, but then my uncle had approached me and said, "Hey, your aunt needs to establish her e-visa. Would you open a restaurant with her, have some share equity in it, and this will help her establish her e-visa?" And so I said, "Yeah, I've worked in restaurants. I don't know how to manage or run a restaurant." And so that's how we started Sake Tumi.
I was going to say, Sake Tumi, and what year was Sake Tumi? Because that must have been pretty quickly after you got to Milwaukee then.
No, that was closer to 2005.
It was that late? Okay. I was thinking it was closer to 2000.
So what were you doing before then?
Because 97, I still went back to school, had to go to school and graduate. And then I was working for a windows, roofing, siding company, did really well, worked my way up to vice president of sales. We were closing a ton of deals. I think the gift I have is with understanding people and so, it just turned out then the owner just started taking a lot of those profits and money and bought a boat and started partying and things like that. And then contractors weren't getting paid on time and I just bailed. I said, I cannot be a part of this. They offered me equity in the company and the whole works. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're not a part of it. But I just, and so I went and working for a company called Genuity, which is the top 5 largest ISPs in the country at the time, backed by Verizon. Did really well with sales there. Then I moved up to represent the entire East Coast and had like Vonage and some big customers selling large scale IP connections and VPN and things of that nature into these companies.
All from Milwaukee. You're doing this from
Milwaukee. They were based in West Dallas.
Yep. Okay.
And then they got bought out by Level 3 Communications, so they offered me a severance or one of 3 people to go to Denver to Level 3 Communications, and I said I don't want to go to Denver, and I took the severance. That's when I started Sake Tumi.
And it just happened that's when your uncle came to you and and made this
proposal.
proposal.
I mean, I started working out while I was there a little bit, and so it was kind of a natural transition.
Wow,
so,
that worked out.
Wild.
Yeah, worked out.
West
All
Dallas,
along, I was working the door to nightclubs and bars.
Okay.
Because I had the fighter background, so I got to meet a lot of people that way. And I wasn't
Good
one
night.
of the. No, I mean I wasn't. I mean, towards the end of my career, yes, I was knocking people up. But in the beginning, I just was like, my whole goal was to meet people. So if like you weren't part of the dress code, hey, sorry, you just got to tuck in the shirt, do these types of things. I wasn't one of those guys that needed to prove. But somebody hits me and punches me, I was taking care of people. So my name was getting out there.
Yeah, well, my perception from outside, so I moved back to Wisconsin and moved to Michael Best in the year 2000. And so that's why I guess 2005, you said Sake Tumi officially opened. Is that right?
I think it was 2005, yeah.
But you pretty quickly, I mean, now hearing this story, it's kind of fascinating to me because you sort of, I don't know how much you had a business plan or whether it was just
No,
the way it worked out. But you rocketed to the top pretty quickly then, because Sake Tumi was, that was in the heyday of Milwaukee Street, at least from my perception. I mean, that was going really high, and I don't know how quickly after that then you opened in Carnevor.
1 year.
1 year later.
Really?
Yeah, Sake Tumi, it was probably the only restaurant, I know this sounds a little arrogant, but like the only restaurant, I think in the history of the city, I would coach people 2 hours on a Tuesday and they would wait.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just was kind of like, what? And I was figuring out as I was going along too.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some crazy stories and, but it just my gift is people, right? And so we always built things one customer at a time. And I remember there was an individual that came in, he wasn't happy where he sat, and then the server moved him because he didn't want one person on his table. He wanted 2 people because he was that greedy. So I heard the guy under his breath cuss at him, and I was like, so I walked over, sat with the guy, he was very eccentric, didn't really warm up to me, started talking to him more, and my goal was that every single person leave out of there happy, no matter what, whether I have to take care of the bill, no matter what. And he actually opened up a lot, started talking. I was like, this guy knows so much about food. This is week 2. So I gave him a whole tour of the place, and he gives me a hug. He got emotional. I'll never forget. He got really emotional. He says, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I'm the food critic for the Shepherd Express.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
Right. And
it's a good thing you had that policy of making sure everybody was happy.
And so I was, really taken back. And not to say that he would have, ruined or hurt my career, but week 2, if you have really offend a food critic, you're in trouble.
Absolutely, yeah. Wow.
So what was the scene like for Asian cuisine in Milwaukee in 2005? I moved here in 2002, and I remember the food scene was just starting to kind of move away from some of the, kind of heavy German stuff and a lot of like chain restaurants into places, somewhat like some more of that kind of local foodie
Well,
stuff.
nobody had really done a modern take on an Asian, and I love Asian food. I'm half Korean, and so we infused Korean dishes in. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, I traveled to other cities, took some of the best recipes and brought my chefs there over and over, created some of the best rolls I think the study's ever seen. I remember I was with my wife in New York, and there was this Chilean sea bass dish, and I had to have it. So here, the server, here's $100. Can I have that recipe? No. It's $300. No. Can I talk to the chef? No. So I was like, okay, how do I get this recipe? And I remember going back to the room, and I call over there, and I'm like, I need to know. My wife's sick as hell. I need to know the exact recipe of that sea bass. Tell me everything that was in there. And so I got all the entire recipe. Couldn't quite make it. It took about a month, but then that dish became very popular.
Wow.
Yeah. So it didn't work out with my uncle. And it's just kind of, in the beginning of my career, I got a ton of press. I got a ton of praise out of nowhere. And so it was just kind of the story where people wanted to talk to me about my fighting career versus like the food and things. But I think I brought in some great chefs. I had a chef in from Japan. I had some really talented people. And so they're like, wow. And so my uncle, he's different. And so I think he wanted to be the guy. And I've never been the guy that wants to be the guy. But, when you're kind of a little bit in the limelight and you're dealing with a lot of people and you're part of the community, it happens. And so we just weren't getting along or seeing eye to eye. And so I remember it got really bad, and I sold my shares for $1, and I got out and I opened Carnevor. And at the time, I mean, everyone's like, you can't do a high-end steakhouse, too expensive. And my head was like this. Because I went from nothing to just blowing up with Sake Tumi, and I was thinking, the whole world's going to follow me. I'm going to be packed over there. And so I remember 2 months in, and we're overdrafting, and my wife is pregnant. She's sitting next to me at Carnevor, and I turned to her, and I'm like looking at there's 2 tables in the restaurant. And I'm like, oh, I think I fucked us. Right? And all of a sudden, I just see her tears start coming down her face. And she's pregnant. And I was like, what did I say? Never once have I ever told her whether I thought I was in trouble or not, or business is slow, ever again at home, right? I never, ever, always things are great, safe. Here's your safe haven. But I remember 2 weeks after that, Dennis Ghetto came in. And he gave us a review and it said, I bit into among one of the best steaks I've ever had in my life. And he says, kid, get ready. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. I just remember that Friday, the phones blew up.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? One review.
Blew up. I was overdrafting. That's a true story. I was overdrafting to the bank, and the bank's like, look, we can't keep doing this, right? And so from that point on out, it just exploded. And we just really know how to take care of people, right? And if we back it up with good food, we really personalize everything over there at Carnevor. I mean, if you spend a lot of money and you're very well known, get your own steak knife with your name on it. We came out with a custom craft box, open it for you. Look, there was a story from a guy that worked for Direct Supply, I believe it was, or Manpower, and there was a 20 top, and all the people were like, want to go to Carnevor? He goes, no, I want to go to Mater's. So he kept saying he wants streusel from Mater's. And so they came in because 19 people outvoted him, and this is the boss, so he was paying for it, right? I remember shaking his hand, he shook my hand, looked me in the eyes, and looked away. I was like, well, it's not my fault that 19 people want to come here, right? And so everybody's food dropped, and we didn't drop his food off for him. And now he's getting even more mad. And I just kind of wanted to piss him off just a little bit because I knew what was coming next. Within a 30-second delay, bring streusel from Mater's and drop it on him. And he went nuts.
Dude, that's pretty badass.
So afterwards, he comes out to me, shakes my hand. He goes, I will never go back to Mater's again. No offense to Mater's. But like loyalty.
How did you know that? How did you get the intel?
Because people were telling me.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're trying to bring it here. He doesn't want to come here. He wants to go to Mater's and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, all right. What is he like?
It's like that scene in The Bear. I assume you've seen The Bear.
I haven't. I saw like one episode. I don't.
You might get PTSD if you watch it. It's an anxiety-inducing show, but it's unbelievable. But there's a scene where he's, at this super high-end restaurant, and it's based in Chicago, and he runs off to get deep dish pizza for folks who are out of town.
It's what we do. I mean, if I don't have key lime pie, I'm going somewhere to go get it for a customer. It's what we do on a regular basis.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, the Dennis Ghetto thing obviously was a huge turning point, it sounds like. But you also must have, I mean, I don't know what your mindset was, but you must have said, okay, we got to take this and run with it, right? You say this is the good fortune that fell from the sky for us, and now we got to make sure that we double down on service and food and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and there was a guy that was an operating partner that I brought on from the beginning, not operating partner, but manager of a lot of Morton steakhouses. Okay. So he opened up like 22 Morton steakhouses, and I'll be frank, I mean, I just sat and listened to him. listened to him in training, looked at his, I mean, I literally modeled, but then took what he had built and helped with the training and personalized everything, because I think hospitality has just always been in my blood. And so we really, really focus on the customer, I believe, more than anybody.
So what happened what's the next iteration after Carnevor?
Opened up Umami Moto.
I love that place. I love all those places.
So did
Umami
I.
Moto was
So did
amazing.
I. So I kept going to Arizona, and so that there's an Iron Chef winner. His sous chef was a guy named Dominic Zampano. So I kept calling him, selling him the drink. So I got him to move here and open up Umami Moto. And it was the only and first 4-star Asian fusion restaurant in the history of the state. And we exploded. Landlord issues at that time, and so we were going to move Umami across the street after the lease was up. Ready to sign a deal with Umami across the street, move Carnevor into the Umami space. And the guys across the street were like, "Well, you're buying this space as a condo, so your kitchen is a shared space with everyone else." And I'm like, "No, it's not.
That's crazy.
I can't have a shared space." They didn't figure it out for a year later, and so we lost Umami Moto. Someday I want to bring that back, though.
Well,
please do.
remind me too. What was the nightclub that was where Umami Moto was?
Eve.
Tangerine?
Eve.
Oh,
Eve.
Yeah.
Eve, yeah.
And was Eve yours?
No.
Okay. That was before
Yeah.
Umami Moto. Okay.
And then were there other ones after that?
Yeah, a bunch of restaurants, they opened and closed. So we opened up Charo, and it was decent at first. Lost our chef, and things just went to. And I'll be frank, I mean, the food was very inconsistent and whatnot. And then opened up a restaurant called 812. So I did it with Ryan Braun and Aaron Rodgers.
right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
They
that.
called me up and they're like, "Hey, these are 2 guys coming off their MVPs."
Yeah.
They're like, "Hey, we want to do a restaurant with you. We want to call it 812, and we'd love to partner with you and do it with you." And I'm like, "Yes, done. Let's do it." Right. And so I just remember there was so much anticipation of that restaurant. And so my partner had a place out in Brookfield that was not the ideal location, but it was a nice flip. And so we could turn it into an 812. And I just remember going back, and I was like, "This is opening. We're not telling anyone that we're opening, but you got 2 superstars that are pretty well known here in Wisconsin associated with it." And I remember going back, telling my manager at the time, Eric Kay, who's now general manager of 3rd Street Market Hall, I said, "Look, I'm just going to go home, take a shower, and then come back." And so I sent a tweet out and saying, "Hey, by the way, who's ever around Brookfield, come on by. We're opening up 812 today." And so I didn't think by the time I got out of the shower, the phone had exploded. Phones over there had exploded. The media all follows me. So all of a sudden I was like, "Oh no." And I come back, he's like, "What did you do? We're supposed to have a soft opening and training and kitchen." We exploded that night. We handled it. And, there was a lot of pressure on that restaurant because, I became really close with Ryan and still talk to him every week. And still was close with Aaron, and it was a lot of pressure because those guys, like, if you start giving them a bad name, the food is not good in the service, that I probably wouldn't take that deal again, just because the pressure wasn't like, it's not worth it for me.
Yeah.
You're not going to make that much money, right? And so, but I remember we won top athlete-owned restaurant in USA Today.
Really?
So
Wow.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, that was the single location out in Brookfield. Is that
Yeah,
right?
we signed
Okay.
a lease in Bayshore.
Okay, that's what.
But then the whole controversy happened,
Right.
and so we just couldn't, and so we just turned it into a home.
Okay.
And that had a 5-year lifespan or something like that. So yeah,
I remember home. Yeah, I lived near there.
yeah, it was okay. It was all right.
So
They
today,
can't all be home runs, right?
Well, if you look at my batting average, it's certainly less home runs than
hit a few home runs for a few years and then exit, right?
What if there was this recent commencement speech that Federer gave, and he said, he outscored his opponents only 54% of the time.
That was Dartmouth, yeah.
Dartmouth, yeah.
Oh wow,
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like, look, you think, the superstar wins everything. It was a tiny margin, really, in the grand scheme of things. But
Well, yeah, the point was that was really interesting. I'd never thought of it, and I don't know that anybody. It almost seemed like he was surprised. It's like nobody had broken down the numbers like that in the tennis world. He wins 80%. He won over his career 80% of his matches. Okay, which is why he was elite, all time great. But he only wins 54% of his
That's
points,
insane.
which is interesting about tennis. I didn't really think about that, because if you think of it, you're winning, you're 40-30 and then win the point,
Yeah.
win the game, I mean.
Yeah.
But you're only winning 54% of your points when you are that dominant.
That is insane.
Yeah.
But it's that his mind, it just finds a way to win. I mean, it's just,
Well, and that's what he was saying.
it's
is
unbelievable.
He said it basically comes down to the fact that you have to know that after a loss of a point, what mental step it takes to win the next one, because you only have to be slightly over 50% of the points to be that dominant.
Totally. I mean, I think it translates on a very small scale to the business with like I remember closing Charo and just reading like it was terrible towards the end. I'm not going to lie. And I learned a lot from it. And so I just remember reading the comments and saying, I'm the next general manager of Applebee's. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, man. I thought it was nice that everybody like they just come and kill you when you say stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I happened to see
that's-
that thing you're talking about yesterday. At the same time, I saw, I don't know if you guys are golf fans, but Scotty Scheffler is so dominant right now, really, if you look at the numbers in the golf world. And they're talking about the fact that one stat that just got uncovered, you can slice and dice numbers so many different ways now. And one stat that they found is that he's number one by a large margin of recoveries, which means after a bad hole, a mistake, a bogey or a double bogey or some other bad thing happening, how many times he gets a birdie on the next hole. And you're right, that's all up there. It's flushing it, and that's what Federer said. You got to flush the previous point and just move to the next one.
What's they say about quarterbacks, right? You got to have a short memory. You
Interception.
You got to go back in there.
You have to.
Yeah.
Even I mean, it even translates to my kids in a sense that it's like they'll say, I'm having the worst day. This girl said this about me. That said about this. I was like, listen, to me, I really don't believe in bad days. Like, believe in bad moments.
Right.
But we're adults now. Let's figure out how we get past that bad moment to move on for the rest of the day.
Right.
Life is too short.
Yeah,
and so I think the greats understand that, and business people. I mean, I remember one of my mentors told me, like, you're going to fail a lot more than you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
And it's just how you move from failure to failure until you succeed is what defines you. And so, believe me, as a fighter, you get knocked down on the canvas a lot. And so I think that background helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in just pure survival, I've always thought one of the great speeches in a movie is when Tom Hanks and can't even think what the name of that movie is, where he's on an island by himself now.
Castaway.
But he's sitting in the Nashville or Memphis home or whatever, with his friends with cold, ice in his drink or whatever. And he just talks about that moment where he was going to commit suicide, and he realized you just got to keep breathing. And it failed, and he just said the goal is just the sun will come up tomorrow, kind of thing. And the sun will come up tomorrow is a huge part of just getting through anything in life, business, sports, athletics,
Getting sleep.
Yeah, right.
We all had those days. I'm sure you guys would litigate. I mean, like 4 days in a row and you're grinding and you're like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm tired of all. And then you wake up the next day like, okay, I'm ready again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure.
So today you have then still Carnevor going strong, right? And then 3rd Street Market Hall.
3rd Street Market Hall.
What else would you have your hands in right now?
We have an equity in a transportation company in Chicago. And then a lot of my life these days, I have a few consulting companies.
Okay.
And so kind of get involved in a lot of things. Sometimes people know what I'm involved in. A lot of times they don't.
Consulting in the hospitality industry or all sorts of industries?
Really?
Okay.
Well, actually, that's not true. I mean, some very, very little hospitality. More business to business and things of that nature. And so I have a partner in a consulting firm. And so we have 6, 7 clients as of yesterday. So I don't really take too many of those clients on. We don't have a website. We're a very quiet company, but we win. We have not lost. And so it's relationship based and business to business. And so, you take on a great pre-stressed concrete company that's in Waukesha, but they're not connected, right? And so, hey, we're going to help you get into this next hotel deal in Chicago. So what we do is we don't take that much monthly, like a lot of consultants do, but we're like, hey, if we win, let's share the back end. So that's what was happening. I was just winning these deals for these friends, and here's a gift card. Well, hold on a second. Wait, I just want a 1 year, $40, $50 million deal. And so that's kind of the basis. And I think we're the only ones that do it. We don't have a website. And I've turned down most clients. We just took one on yesterday. And it's a very large manufacturer of marijuana, and so we're going to work the path of, medicinal needs to become legal here, and so that's the next big project that we're going to take on.
Wild.
So this may be cutting too close to the bone, and maybe you don't want to answer it, but I'm curious. How you're at a phase with Carnevor that is just kind of, I don't know if this is if you would characterize it like this, but just maintain, right? I mean, you got your reputation there; it's established. I mean, that's got to be a very different phase you're in right now, and takes a different mindset. But I'm curious if that drives you still, and whether you have enough passion for that, or whether you have other passions that really are what drive your life today.
I have a lot of passions, but I mean, a carnivore is still a major passion of mine. I mean,
Okay.
it's just like, it's kind of raise your money there. You do political deals there, consulting firms take me to dinner. But it's also, I meet with my team once or twice a week. I'm there try to be there almost there every night. And so I'm constantly still doing research and driving my chef crazy to constantly push the envelope with new ideas, keeping things fresh, always going out to find the absolute best product of whatever else is there in America, sourcing Wagyu from around the world to having the best selection in America. So we are constantly pushing the limits. I just, the produce is great, but went out and searched and I was like, hey, our tomatoes are not quite as great off season. You get them from certain areas in Latin America, they pump, antibiotics in. So we went out and found a place that was doing hydroponic tomatoes. So all year round, you're getting the great. So we're constantly looking for the absolute best in product and charging accordingly.
Okay, so that still drives you.
My
That's still-
foot has not ever, will never get off the gas pedal with carnivore because I need carnivore to do everything else.
Yeah.
And so we need to constantly really remind people we're the best. And also service-wise too, just very thoughtful, personalized. It's a pleasure to be able to take care of people and see that they came in with their family and they had an incredible experience. That's what drives me.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, I mean, I always kind of wonder when you're at about the 20-year mark on a restaurant. Some of these places that have endured restaurants nationally that I'm thinking of that have been able to maintain their reputation for, frankly, more than about 20 years, it seems like it gets tough, right? Because for a lot of chef-owned restaurants, it's just tough to do it much longer and keep the level of intensity at that. I mean, it sounds like you've been able to find a place that works for you.
I also think we build a great workplace culture. And so I'm a huge culture guy. And so, Third Street team, we just had this week, we got the suite, gave them really great food, great wine, brought up Eric Thames up there to hang out there and take pictures with them, and so just always trying to do carnivore. We're planning a management dinner where we go to a really nice high-end dinner and pop great wine, just really taking care of people like we take care of the customer, right? And so I've had some of the longest tenured staff at Carnivore. I mean, last time I hired a server was 8 years ago, I think, or
that's
something like that,
unbelievable.
right?
That
And
is
so kitchen rotates a little bit. We've got a good team in there, and the bar staff is unbelievable. I think I have the best team in Wisconsin.
That's especially
they're
incredible because the pandemic was in the middle of that. I mean, did that knock you there or not?
Well, when the government forced us to close it did, right? And so I just remember, though, just really, I mean, we established, we weren't willy-nilly with this, right? I put together an operations group. We brought in Steve Boss from MMAC. We brought in the health director at the time, brought in Medical College of Wisconsin, 454-page criteria to stay open and how to keep people safe. And so I just remember they did a shutdown, and the governor's trying to shut the whole state down. And I was like, wait a second. We were the first to do the mask mandate. Our numbers were coming down. And so, the city attorney went to the city attorney, some folks did, and convinced them that we shouldn't be shut down. So we stayed open as a city. But before that, I remember that's when I really realized the power of social media, and which, by the way, I hate social media. I think it's like the worst thing that's ever happened for this next generation of kids and even some adults. But I remember tweeting out saying, hey, all right, we're going to shut down as a state. We had a great run restaurants, and good luck to you and your management and the employees and all their families. And it went viral.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, what did I get myself into? So then I remember that some people from the governor's office were calling me the next day. What are you trying to do? What is going on here? I go, I'm trying to feed my employees.
Yeah.
Try to feed their families and my family too. And so it was, I remember National Public Radio calling me, all these news sources, and I was like, whoa. So I've got to be careful with what I tweet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kicked the hornet's nest on that one.
What's your reasoning on the social media? Because I sort of subscribe to that also, but I'm curious to know what your philosophy is.
I hate it. I mean, I'm on it because you have to be to promote your brand and your
Right.
businesses. And I think there's 10% good with social media, but I think it's a completely fake world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, and it's like ruining the image of younger girls coming up, looking at these Instagram photos of these girls that took 30 minutes to take a picture with the right angle and using filters,
Right.
and them like looking at them saying they're so beautiful. I'm not.
Yeah.
Right. Or trying to create, it's all highlights. Do I tell you the day that I feel like I couldn't make payroll in one of my places, and do I put that on Twitter saying
Right.
I feel like shooting myself? No, I don't. It's no low lights there. I mean, it's all highlights.
Yeah.
And it's also a place and a venue for people to spew off their venom. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just, they're so nasty.
Yeah, there's some
people.
real
And
ugliness.
half the time on Twitter, they're always telling me, don't say anything. Or don't. No, I fire right back. I fire right back because it's just my personality, and I try not to fire back all the time. But I remember I was in California, and or Florida, and some girl said it's my 19th birthday, cash app me $100 on the back of her windshield.
Yeah.
So I just said, oh, okay, this is great. 21st century panhandling. And oh my gosh, the mob came after me and they were attacking and attacking. I saw your website. I saw your son, you bought him a BMW when he was 17. I saw this and this and that. Well, what they don't know the story is my son started with a 2.4 or 2.8. And I said, look, I want better for you as your freshman year. Give me 8 semesters of straight A's. I'll buy you a BMW. I'll buy you that car. He came back the 7th semester, was bawling to my wife because he didn't think he got a B+ in one class. And she's just like, you're still going to give it to him? I go, hell no, I'm not going to give it to him. Somehow he did extra credit and talked to that teacher and getting an A. He did it. And I put it on the story that like he came out and he was bawling, but he earned it.
Yeah.
I didn't just hand it to him. Right. So they didn't look at all these types of things. So one guy was like, oh yeah, I work for companies, and then I finally made management. In 2 years, I closed. It closed down. I was a manager, and they only paid me like a month's severance and things like that. And you're a piece of whatever. And I said, oh no. I said, you got it wrong. The only reason the company closes is because it made you a manager, loser. Send, block. When I shouldn't be writing that stuff. But it's hard not to fire back on that. I was getting attacked like crazy, so I fire back.
There's a huge instinct to fire back on that stuff. I haven't read the book, but I've read a lot about it, and I've heard interviews with this guy Jonathan Haidt in his book, I think is The Anxious Generation, and his big thing now is, no smartphones until I think I don't know what his
18.
age limit, 18 probably.
Smart.
He said, get phones out of schools. Is like every kid who's ever done it, or any school that's ever gotten rid of smartphones in particular, because that's really the venue for all the social media stuff. Everything's better, right? Emotional outlook better, grades better,
100%.
Everything's better. And because how's a 14-year-old kid supposed to deal with, like you said, this fake curated presentation of other people's lives, and all you're thinking the whole time is like, oh man, my life's terrible.
100%. But it's not only that. Let's take it a step further into like there's a lot of YouTubers making a living of going and messing with the elderly and going and messing with people on a regular basis because people think it's funny, but it's really not funny, and that's how they're making a living. So now all of a sudden, everybody wants to be an influencer, right?
Yeah.
But how about like going into the trades? How about going and
working hard.
Right. And we're moving away from that, and it's scary.
Think about this is my thing on it. 2 things. One, I've got 3 daughters, and 2 of them are young, and my wife keeps thinking that hopefully social media gets blown up, government banned TikTok or something like that happens before they get to be teenagers, because 2 of them are real young. But think about in terms of really analyzing an epidemic that is injuring people versus, and I don't want to get too much on a political soapbox about the COVID-19 pandemic, but there's so many things where I've thought to myself, look how injurious this epidemic is, and look, social media is an epidemic, right?
Yes.
And you can pretty much follow through where it's injuring people, both physically but also mentally. In a real way that you could argue certainly there should be so much more intervention in that epidemic than there was in COVID-19. And think about COVID-19 is shutting everything down. Anyway, that's one thing. The second thing for me with social media, though, that I say that I really think is something that I don't hear discussed is, for me, the reason social media, in addition to all the things we've already talked about here, is so problematic, is that there's a loss of humility in the world already.
100%.
And humility is about not look at me, and social media by its very nature, you are asking a broad audience to look at something that you have, that is about you, that is, like you said, always a positive thing. And it is this weird lack of humility that is a necessary part of broadcasting, what you ate for lunch, kind of a thing. That is just such a mental shift in the population that it's a big problem to me.
Well, and the flip side of that, right, is these young people are laying that stuff out there. Look at me, and they're just inviting this, nasty responses.
I think it's 16 and under, the average is 30 selfies per day or something like that.
I mean,
it's insane.
It is insane.
It's disgusting, actually, if you really think about it. And it's also about the cyberbullying and things of that nature too. Like, I don't know, I've always been, and I was raised right, but if I see somebody in the gym and they're bigger or they're challenged or some sort, it's like I want to gravitate and do something really nice. I want to encourage them, right? Kindness, right? I mean, because that's what makes me happy, right? And so it's like, but I see people like attacking and filming these people without them being aware that they're like, that to me is evil.
Yeah.
That's
I think that's just
nasty
evil.
business.
I really do, and so I just despise it sometimes.
Yeah, and like you said, there's a 10%. I actually think I've got a daughter right now who is just graduated from college, and she's in Europe backpacking with her roommate, and she is using Instagram as sort of the travel log, right? And I do like that. I'm like, because I kind of am like, Instagram and all this kind of stuff, because 90% of the time it is even if you're not a person without humility, there still is a lack of humility in when you post something that's just kind of a look at this thing.
Yes.
But the travel log thing, posting pictures for grandparents, and advertising and marketing and media, there are some uses for social
family
media.
experiences and things of that nature, and it's just like
Absolutely, photo album stuff, but the core of it is evil. The core of a whole bunch of it is evil.
I tell this story all the time, and I'm like, guys, you don't have to document. I've had some pretty big wins. I'm coming off some pretty big wins right now. We're involved in the Brewers deal and involved in the convention center. So I remember those moments of winning that brought me but I'll tell you, the best moment of my life was I was with my son. I'll never forget this. He was 10 years old. We were at Old Country Buffet. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking over, and there was this big African-American guy, and he kept staring at me. And he was a scary looking guy. And I'm like, okay, did I throw this guy out of the club, or what's going on? And I remember looking at my son saying, stay on this side, whatever. So he approached the table, and I stood up, and I backed up, and I was in stance, like what's going on? And he said, is your name Omar? And I said, it is. And so I looked at my son, and I looked at him, I said, what's up? And he goes, do you remember me? And I said, I don't. I'm sorry. He goes, you did that Asian sushi restaurant, right? I said, yeah. And he said, and I get emotional every time I tell this story. It's the best moment of my life. And he said, well, I said, I asked you for work. And you said, okay, fine. You can lay some bricks, and you can do these things. And you paid me cash, and you paid me for about 10 weeks of doing that. And the time was up, and I thanked you, and I hugged you. And I said, I think I do remember that. I remember you and everything like that. He says, I lost my daughter. I was in a shelter at the time. I didn't tell you any of that. Your money that you gave me, and you gave me the job and the opportunity, even though I'm a felon, and you didn't ask any of that, got me back on my feet. I got my daughter back. I got my life back together. And he goes, you changed my life.
Wow, beautiful.
In front of my son.
Wow.
10-year-old son. I mean, that was the greatest moment of my life.
Yeah.
That feeling, none of this social media bullshit, none of all these other types of things, no materialistic thing, none of that.
Real human connection.
Yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, that is incredible. And you're right. I mean, it's completely disconnected from all the social media stuff.
I did tweet one time, though, I just, and I recommend just to do this. Just buy that next person your coffee. Buy the elderly. This is an embarrassing story because I did tweet this, and I normally don't tweet these types of things, but I just like when I go out with my family, I like buying people surprise dinner. I like buying elderly and things like that because it's just, that's what makes you happy in life. And I remember I saw this lady, she was by herself, she was doing puzzles at Panera, and I just bought her a $50 gift card. I think it was 50 at the time. And so I remember him at Panera, and I went on the table and I said, here's my good deed of the day. Here's a $50 gift card. So I went back and I sat down, I was waiting on my food, and she came over to him. She goes, why did you buy that for me? I said, I was just doing a good deed of the day. She goes, you don't know me? I said, I didn't mean to offend you or anything like that. She goes, but why'd you buy it for me? I guess I just wanted to be kind, like good deed of the day. And she started bawling. Wow. And then I started bawling in the middle of Panera. Here I'm hugging this lady, bawling with her in the middle of Panera. Those are the moments that you just I can't explain to people. When they say you want to be happy, make money and give it away. That's what makes you happy. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that never really fully understood the concept is really when you're doing things for others, those are the happiest people in the world.
There's a phrase I heard that I think of all the time. It was fairly recent. I was listening to a podcast of a comedian, actually, a guy named Tom Papa, and he does just a humorous podcast, a lot about food and stuff like that. And he made some comment about never lose faith in your own kindness. And I'm like, man, that just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like no matter what happens and all the haters and all that kind of stuff, you be kind. You never lose faith in
100%.
Keep doing it.
It's not easy.
No.
People disappoint you all the time. And they do things where it's like, what? Yeah. But yeah, that is a great, great saying right there. But it's the moments, I hate to keep telling you stories, but it's the moments that I remember having a deal was going bad. There was a lot of bad was going bad. My partner was killing me. He was tough. And I came home and I'm like, I'm done. I'm just going to go to 9 to 5. And my son was 6 at the time. And I sat down with him and I was crying and I was like, hey, we got to stick together. We're family. And you know what? Dad's always going to figure things out. Because guys, as men, we have to figure it out. There is no backup plan. We've just got to, no one's going to feel sorry for us. Mm-hmm. Animals and women, they will, but not us, right? And I remember talking for half an hour, and I remember him thinking really deeply, and I'm like, here are my strategic plans. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start this, start that. And he was really digging in. I was like, wow, I'm getting through. And I said, what are you thinking? And he looks at me, he goes, "My butt hurts." Took away all my stress and pain, laughed for 10 minutes straight. And I was like, it's going to be all right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
That's a classic. There's some perspective from kids, right? Yeah. I didn't hear a goddamn thing you said, Dad. Blah, 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 business, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I see you have a Milwaukee Tool shirt on. Is that just something? You have some connection with Milwaukee Tool guys?
You know, Steve Richmond, and a lot of their leadership have just become really good friends. Steve's become a really great friend of mine, and we kind of had some of the same things as we were growing our companies. I don't really want to get into it deeply, but he's just a great human. He actually just made CEO of TTI, of the whole company, and so he's been a great friend for 20 years.
Steve Richmond is?
Yeah.
I did not know that. See, I used to do a lot of work for them, and when he became the president of at the time we call it Metco, nobody uses that term anymore, but Milwaukee Electric Tool Company. But I didn't know he had risen. Did he move to Hong Kong?
That was just a month ago. He's traveling there more now, but I remember meeting him 17 years ago, and hey, Omar, it's a $400 million company. And we said, hey, look, I'd love to learn from you. Sat down, had wine, and became good friends. And he's like, I want to grow it to a $7 billion company by this point. And now it's $10 billion.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's a killer and great culture guy, understands it, and appreciates the hospitality, super loyal. And so they sent me just a couple shirts.
Cool.
Tim Albrecht, who runs the Milwaukee office down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we got to do a quick detour because twice you've said the word wine, which is something both Toby and I are really into. Me maybe a little more than Toby, but
me too.
What kind of wines are you into?
Oh, for me, I really like big Napa Valley cabs.
Yeah.
And so I have my own wine. I source grapes out of Napa, in between Oak Knoll, in between Opus and Trefethen. And so we age it in French oak barrels. The guys, 3 fat guys, produces it, and these are 3 ex-packers, really good friends. Actually, we were just in town this weekend, and they make great wine now.
What's it called?
Omar Reserve. It's the only thing I've ever named after myself, but it's just like with wine, that's my one. That's my one flex. Yeah, and so that's the one thing I will flex if I post is wine, just because I'm really into it. It's big Napa Valley cabs.
That's awesome.
Drink a lot of wine. Yeah.
Same.
Well, let's pop a bottle of wine together.
Yeah,
done.
Carnevor.
I have one right here, actually.
Actually, we have a 100-acre tasting at 5, so I'm going to be drinking a lot. I don't know if you've heard of 100 acres.
For sure.
My favorite of all time. Then we have a political fundraiser we have to go, and so I have to write a check for that and then come back to Carnevor.
Did you get connected to the wine through Carnevor, and then, or had you already been involved?
No, so I had asked them. I said, I've always wanted to do one of my own wine, and the private labeling thing is a lot of times it's not good wine, right? Mm-hmm. So they had sent me for years, were sending me samples and some of the great, and so I just finally was like, whoa, I really like this one. Let's make this happen. And it wasn't as easy, It's not like I went there and I was stomping on the grapes and I was like George Clooney in the agave fields. And no, I just really like this wine. Let me make a label and let me package it over there and let me buy a bunch. And that was it. So now it's the number 3 seller at Carnevor. I have a Carnevor Select coming out, which is going to be Carnevor's own cab, sourced out of Napa. And then I have a Pinot that is killer. My son's name is Kai, so it's going to be called the Kai Collection. Omar Reserve is going to go away. And then I'm going to have a rosé named after my wife and 2 daughters, ACG. So Ava, Connie, Gracie, a rosé that's killer too. So we're going to private label those and have those available soon.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say we have to the extent that we have a segment. It is the overrated, underrated, and I would say that rosé has got to be one of the most underrated wines in the world.
1000%.
People think it's sweet, or they just have a bad connotation from history of shitty sweet rosés. But a great dry rosé is one of the best things in the world, and it's not just for summertime. I drink that shit just like champagne all year round, all the time.
1000%. So we'll drink a few bottles when you guys come. Let's get drivers. I want you to try those 3 bottles, and then we'll maybe pop a big Napa Valley cab too. Yeah,
I'm in. Dude.
So we had. Is this all in conjunction with the 3 fat guys? Are you still working with? Okay.
Yep.
Because remember, we had a bottle of that at the office, and I can't remember who and how we got that.
The Omar Select?
No, not of the Omar Select. It was they had
Omar Reserve.
Sorry.
Yeah. but the 3 fat guys had a. Did they make a beer too at one point or something? Okay, we had something like that around the office. A bottle of Napa Cab, I believe it was, and I don't know. Have they always sold it through your names, or do they have their own wines?
No, they have their own wines, and so we just private label their wines.
Okay.
Yeah, and so but they've been doing this a long time. Tony Mole now is been full time. really has his own the vineyard out there in Sonoma.
Yeah.
And so they source grapes from like there. So they started with buying grapes from Woodson, Charles Woodson,
Yep.
and then they bought land and have their own winery. They're doing really well with it.
Cool. Yeah.
And
So
just got progressively a lot better over the years. I mean, so there's cabs out there that we drink that are big bottles. Usually, when customers are popping in and wanting me to drink it with them, like $600-$700 bottle. But then I mean, I think there's $50-$100 bottles that drink with the big ones.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's the secret sauce, right? Is you find that $50.
So I found a $50
cab.
bottle called Liquidity the other day, and whoa, does it drink big, and it's got little fruit for it. It's beautiful. It's $50 a bottle.
Yeah.
So because you just like start popping these bottles on a Tuesday, like no, I'm not some gazillionaire over here. Like you gotta be careful.
It's not a Tuesday night wine.
Right. Exactly.
So what else are you into then these days? You're still tapped into the jiu-jitsu thing a little bit?
No. So just a lot of community stuff now, and try to I'm very working a lot with the RNC and all those things right now, and so I'm on the host committee and just working. Became one of the chairs for the opening party too, and just working through things, city, county, and things of that nature, and coming off that was a really great win and very small part in the whole Brewers deal, political deal, to get the money from the state to keep them here. I mean, it's just mind blowing to me that legislators from here were voting against it, right? And so it's even some of my Republican friends in the Senate were voting against it, and it's sort of like, what are you going to do? They don't know the land of the building.
Yeah.
And the media kept going with this whole story of, it's going into a billionaire's pocket. No, it's not. It's going into the land. It's going into a building he doesn't own to fix the upgrade so that he signs a long-term lease. And so it just was pretty. I get it's a lot of money, but I mean, it's crazy if they were to go away. What are you going to do with that building?
Yeah.
State owned, state run. And so it just was. It's common sense to me. It just didn't make sense that there were legislators voting against it, but that was a really nice win. And so now we put a Third Street Market Hall, and this is all separate. People are like, "Oh, this is why you did that and got involved." No, Third Street came out after that, and so we put a little Third Street Market Hall in the stadium, and it's been really good. I mean, it was kind of a dead area, and now you can get some food of ethnicity and also barbecue and kawa and anytime arepa and Campales tacos for a reasonable price in the ballpark.
Are your kids? What's your family situation in Milwaukee? Do you still have your kids?
Yeah, my son just finished his sophomore year at Marquette University, so he's doing well there.
Okay.
Rest in peace, Dr. Lovell, who's a good friend, great guy. It was very sad to hear that. My daughter just got direct admit into the UW-Madison Business School.
Oh, wow.
She got in everywhere she applied, and listen, she's very humble. I won't brag for myself. I'll brag for her. 4.6 GPA, all AP classes, was the only female in the entire school to win the athlete scholar, like unbelievable athlete, beautiful, got the whole world in front of her.
Where'd you go to high school?
Brookfield Central.
Okay.
And then my youngest is a sophomore at Kettle Moraine High School.
Okay. So you live out there somewhere?
So we moved out to Lake Country, and so my one daughter transferred, and then my other daughter said, no, I'm staying my senior year here at Brookfield Central. So
Got it.
It's awesome.
yeah. So
Congratulations.
things are going pretty well.
Nothing
pretty
better
well.
than
So,
seeing your kids do well, right?
I mean, but that's what success is. I mean, we can all make money, right? And so it's like, but like if that's, I had a friend and I, he passed, but he called me and he's like, I got to take the G5. I have to talk to you. I'm like, sure, when? Tonight. And so he came out and we had dinner, and he was just like, yeah, I 19, he had 3 marriages and just company after company, bank after bank, real estate. And he's just like, look, my 19-year-old son, 21-year-old son hasn't talked to me in 6 months. 19-year-old daughter's in rehab. She's on pills and everything like that. And I was like, damn.
Yeah.
You haven't talked to your son in 6 months? He goes, no. He goes, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, so I just said, man, you're a failure. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, if you failed, and you got this look on his, this has got a billionaire, right? He got this look on his face, and he kind of sat back like that, and he was just like, looked at me. Dinner ended in like 5 minutes. Left, gone, and I was like, whoa, I just lost a friend. Yeah. I didn't mean to call him a loser, but I just meant like you really failed in life.
Mm-hmm. Well, what would you trade? I mean, what amount of money or possessions would you trade to have those relationships be successful, and for your kids not to be suffering?
So he called me 6 months later. I kept calling him and texting him. He wouldn't answer me back. First of all, he wasn't great with text, but he wouldn't call me back. And so I remember he called me 6 months later, and he's just like, listen, he goes, I was really taken back. Nobody really talks to me like that. I go, look, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to talk. He goes, no, don't apologize. He goes, you told me what it needed to be. He goes, since then, I have a relationship with my son. My daughter's doing better. I'm out. He goes, I realized, like, what's most important in life? I'm like, well, why did it take you so long to figure that out?
Yeah.
I didn't say that, but like, come on, man. Like, I mean,
people lose sight, right?
they lose. It was just
important.
company after company. He went through 3 wide. Like, it just was.
Yeah, well, I won't
Then
name.
he died.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I won't name names, but I'm always keyed in on that when I hear about public figures because, a lot of public figures, I mean, you're different. You actually know some of these people, but, for a guy like me, you kind of have a relationship with a public figure just through the media and you know a little bit about him. But one of the things, I'll see 2 guys and in all respects, they'll sort of look the same to me publicly and they'll have the same level of success. And then I'll find out one is estranged from all their children. Like I'll hear that every once in a while. Yeah. And one has a really good relationship with all their children. And I mean, there's no way. I don't care what twists and turns life has taken. I don't care what bad breaks you've been given. If you were estranged from 3 or 4 kids that you have, there's a problem there, right? It means something.
Like 1 or 2 is probably fine to be estranged from. And
Right.
I have 4. I could probably deal with 2.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I have a son and 2 girls. At the time, the 2 girls were ready for me to be out of the house. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, it's like for me, that family dynamic is everything, right? But also what really makes me happy, I realized this later on in life, is not money. I've never been motivated by money. It's friends. Mm-hmm. It's your friend. Like for me to sit around at a table like this, for us to drink a little bourbon or wine, have a cigar or whatever, and just talk shit to each other is the best time of my life.
Yeah, amen, brother.
It's
100%
it's what we need
true.
in our lives, And so it's like some of our friends used to see our texts, like we try to offend each other so hard, but you're that close, you just can't, right? So,
Well, that's what a lot of people don't understand. I mean, you can really measure the strength of your friendship by how awful you are to your best friends, right? Like the more shit you get on, the nastier shit you say. It's because you love each other, and it's just all in good fun, and they're not going to be offended by it or anything. But kind of going back to the social media thing, I mean, those kind of personal interactions, like you said, sitting around the table, drinking wine, drinking bourbon, doing all that kind of stuff, talking shit. I mean, there's no replacement for that. There's no social media thing, and I do, I see it a little bit with my own kids. Like they just don't have the same kind. I mean, the pandemic was part of this too, being kind of cut out of society for so long, but there's just no replacing it. And I don't know how you make sure to foster that other than kind of maybe leading by example. My son's certainly seen me sit around a table with my buddies drinking too much wine, talking shit. So hopefully he learns that lesson.
I think they will. I mean, it's like, listen, if we've done our job, like somebody told me that by the time your kids turn 18, you spent 90% of your time with them, and so. I got emotional thinking of my daughter. She's 18 now. She's going to go to, she's way smarter. I had to work really hard to get a 3.0. Really hard. Honestly, I did. And so she's going to finish with 4.6. She's on her way. But at the same time, you've done your job. And now she's 18. She's going out of the house. And it's a scary thought. And so I remember for Vegas, we just balled out. Got this huge villa, used all my connections. Gave her the best trip ever for her 18th birthday. Each kid got to bring a friend. She brought her boyfriend and whatnot. And it's just remember thinking like, wow, hold on, we're spending a lot of money here. But I was thinking, I saw the look on her face when we walked in the room. I saw her face when we went to the great restaurants. I swear, that is just like, there's no better feeling in the world. So we went to Carbone, and she orders the steak, and I'm like, okay, whatever, get a steak. I mean, it was a steakhouse. We're all eating her pasta, and I get the bill, and I'm like, I look at the price of the steak. She didn't realize the price was a $600 steak.
Holy shit.
God. It was like a tomahawk. And I was like, $600? I go, you better finish that shit. We're not leaving here till you finish that steak. I know it's your birthday, but it was just those experiences and those times. She's now for her graduation gift, I'm taking her to New York. My friend's going to give us a behind the scenes tour of the New York Stock Exchange, ringing of the bell, the whole works. And so I've lined up some really cool stuff for her like that. And that is the greatest thing in life, is to be able to give that and see that experience for them. Like, I just can't, it doesn't get any better.
No, you do anything for them, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they talk about, our culture now is about experiences in a good way. That I think is a good thing. I do worry about, I don't know how old you are, Omar, but
25.
There you go. Okay, so I'm twice as old as you.
I'm with you. I'm there too.
The thing is, I see some of this stuff. I mean, now, one thing with social media is you get pummeled with like some photograph from the late 70s or something like that, and it is weird how it evokes a memory of what the world was like. And I don't just mean my life. I mean, the world was, the pre-internet world was a very different place, a pre-social media world. And I do sometimes wonder, we've talked about some of the problems with it. I don't know that there's a solution. I certainly don't have an answer to it.
No solution.
It's part of the world now.
It's going to get worse.
And it is a more impersonal thing, right? I mean, even cell phones social media, pre-smartphone, when you used to just have to call your friends and sort of gather and hang out on a summer day and just be gone for an entire day, that world is just completely gone. I don't think that you can ever replicate that. And there was a certain connectedness for me that was actually very similar to the way my father grew up in the 50s. It wasn't all that different.
Much closer.
There's a big difference now.
Yeah. I agree.
I'll give you an example. Like I went to a university, spoke about a year ago, and just really explained to them like how to build relationships, how to build friends, right? One at a time. In the beginning of my career, went out and collected 1,000 business cards, and then the next year I looked, I'm like, wait, I don't have a relationship with any of these people, right? Yeah. So how to really build meaningful relationships, and then that will really take you farther than any degree will. Like I've always believed in that, right? And so I went and spoke and explained some of the relationships we have, some of the things we've done in terms of getting the convention center completion done when that's at dormant 20 years. And nobody thought we could do it. But it was because we had interpersonal skills and getting along both sides and be reasonable. And so after the talk, I was like, the kids are like, oh, great. And one kid went up to meet me. And I was like, damn, 5 years ago, every kid would have came up to meet me and asked me about this and that. And I remember that day and the next day, at least 25 reached out over social media, over LinkedIn, over... I was there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Could have talked to me.
But they waited to reach out to me, and that tells you something. I mean, no, like we look each other in the eyes, make an experience. Like, okay, I'll tell you a quick story. Like I remember, I'll never forget this. Like I was just coming up on my career. Sake Tumi was booming. Katie Boyce calls me. She's like, hey, the Gov like what you're doing. They want you to come on the tourism board. Want you to represent Milwaukee and stir it up because, Milwaukee's not really appreciated. So I went on the tourism board. And then they said, well, he's having a little party at his house. Why don't you go to his house? I'm like, governor wants me to come to his house. Jim Doyle, Governor Doyle. I was like, yeah. Get dressed up, suit, all these cards ready to go. Get there. And I was the first one there like an hour early. And they're like, oh, okay, come on in here. And so one of the catering staff comes in and says, do you want something to drink? And just starts talking to me. Kid named Jim. I'm like, no. He goes, do you want a Miller Lite? Do you want a drink or something like that? And I go, no, I don't want to start drinking yet. I mean, I just want to wait till meet her. I can't wait to meet all the dignitary, all the people in here. And so he kept coming by me, and he's like, you have to be important. Like, are you coming here to the governor's? I said, no, I just own a restaurant. Like, I'm really not. And so we started talking more, and every so often he'd come by, and he's like, Mr. Important, can I get you something to drink? And like, really was charming, like unbelievable. And afterwards, had a lot of questions, was asking me about myself and things. So I remember afterwards, I gave him a card, and I said, look, I'm kind of on the come up right now. Like, if I can ever do anything for you, you please let me know. Like if you're going to get a job in Milwaukee or you need a connection or whatever, this and that and this and that. He goes, no, I'll send you an email, get in touch, this and that. And so I was like, wow. So I still tell this story when I do all my training of all my employees. I'm like, I don't remember a single other person in that room. I remember Jim. Yeah. And I'm still talking about him today. Yeah. In that short time, he made that much of an impression on me that I'm like still talking about this kid.
My daughters would call that Riz. He had Riz, charisma.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure what that meant, but yeah. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Try to keep up. I got the lingo of the young kids. No cap.
I was trying to think of other words but I just can't right now. So yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about.
You have to tell us some of the words over here.
Yeah, Lindsay's laughing. She's like, oh yeah, I know that.
Lit. That was lit.
Yeah, lit.
Yeah.
Slay is a good one.
Oh, slay. There you go. Yeah.
Bussin'.
Bussin'. Actually,
food is bussin'.
I said that at a restaurant the other day because they just learned the word. My daughters go, oh my God. And the waitress starts laughing. And I was just like, did I say something wrong?
If you really want to humiliate your kids in front of their friends, if there's food around, say, this food is bussing. Because they can't stand it when you add the G and pronounce it properly.
Actually, I got it better. I said bussin'. Right?
Double bussin'.
Right, double bussin'. I mean, I thought it was pretty cool. And they were like putting their heads down like this. And I was
transferred
like,
buses. Well, so tell us about the convention center and the RNC and all those big, huge projects that you're involved with.
Yeah, so I became chair of Visit, and I remember a year, and I was like, whoa, this is what is going on here at the organization. And so ended up being the chair there 7 years. Had to kind of make some changes and fire a lot of people and do a national search and I ended up bringing Peggy Williams. And I remember doing a search committee, and half the committee is like, no, we like somebody with more experience, like national experience and things like that. And I was like, no, Peggy's a leader. Like, I see her as a leader. And they're like, well, we might outvote you, might go with somebody nationally. I said, okay, well, whose committee is this? Like, well, it's yours. I go, well, then it's my vote. You guys are on my committee. We're going with Peggy, and that's it.
Sometimes you need to be a dictator.
I did. Well, I wouldn't call it dictator, but yeah, at the time it seemed like that. Well, she's made me look at what she is, a dynamo.
Yeah.
That woman, I love that woman. She is insane with what she's done. First woman ever to do it, knocking down doors, like killing it in every respect, built a team, unbelievable. And so then we realized I got the attention of Governor Walker at the time and Scott Neitzel, who was DOA secretary. There was a consultant called John Leanling. So we did the same thing over there. We had to let go of that CEO, did a national search, and brought in Marty Brooks, who ran Madison Square Garden and whatnot. So now you have smart people that are running the convention, smart people that are running Visit. These two before were pointing the fingers, no business was getting done. And now actually they're actually winning business, which state-run facility, you should. But we knew at that point, brought in my partner, he has the firm, LLC, MMAC folks, and really built a team. Craig did all the modeling to go to the state to figure out, okay, we need to bond out for this. We need to get some money from the state. Moral obligation for about $21.5 million from the state, which nobody thought we could do, to be able to bond out for it, and we won. And so then turned it over, and they got the bonding for it, and here we are. It just opened up the other day. And so $460 million project that sat dormant for 20 years, which is insane.
Yeah.
But it was that win that coming off that win, we're like, okay, well, we can do things like this, right? Yeah. And so he caught people's attention, and it's just going to be massive for our community.
Yeah.
Bringing all these people in to pay for our infrastructure. No brainer.
Yeah, we were invited to do a tour last week, but we both had to miss it, and I'm anxious to get over there.
It's beautiful. You guys have to go check it out. It's beautiful.
It looks amazing.
They've done
from
an
just driving by.
job.
It's an impressive structure just to see it.
Yeah.
And that thing needed help.
It did. I mean, you're in the bottom third percentile, right? And so now it's on an even 50% playing field with our peers. And so now we can actually go out, and it's new. So you're going to go out and win a lot of business. If you look at the trajectory of conventions, this year you take out the RNC room nights, we're back to 2019 without the RNC. Next year on, you see the trajectory just increase over the next 10 years. Yeah. Think about hospitality, think about business, think about what it does for our city. And the real hope is that they come here and fall in love with our city, and they actually like, hey, I want to move there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's the real hope.
Well, I've always wondered, Northwestern Mutual forever has had that annual convention where they bring their people in from all over, and you notice it, right? If you, where our offices are in the 3rd Ward, if you're downtown or in the 3rd Ward, when that convention goes on, you know it because there's people everywhere.
Unbelievable.
And I actually have some relatives who their father was a general agent for Northwestern Mutual out of Michigan.
Okay.
And as kids, they would always come to the convention with their family in Milwaukee. And it was the selling point. They both ended up living here as adults because because it is true, especially if you come, it seems like every year there's perfect weather for that Northwestern Mutual thing. And if you come over and Milwaukee shines like it can for a week on a convention like that, it is a selling point that can get somebody to move here. So I always was wondering if that was successful, why we didn't attract more conventions. And I understand a part of it was just the convention center was never hospitable to a good convention. So I'm hoping that really does turn the corner now.
I hate to say this because you always make enemies when you make change and you let people go. But like the leadership of Visit and the leadership of the Wisconsin Center District, they weren't working together. They were just pointing the finger at each other. And I got myself into this, like, what did I get myself into? But I'm an all-in kind of guy. And I spent a lot of time on this. But now you've got competent leadership in both working together to win business. You're going to see the city flourish.
Good.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Well, I will say when I bring like law school buddies who have never been to Milwaukee, the reaction is almost universal after a couple of nights and going out and just the restaurant scene and just the
great
lake. They don't even know what's on the lake. They're like, I had no idea. They always say the same thing. I had no idea that Milwaukee was this cool.
I always tell people this.
Totally agree.
I had a bunch of Chinese businessmen in years ago, probably 15 years ago, into town. And it was one of those days, I think it might have been March, but maybe it was April. And it was one of those weird days where it was like 85 degrees. And it was like right around spring break time. And all the UWM kids were at Bradford Beach. So, I mean, it was just packed on like a Wednesday afternoon. And I had these Chinese businessmen. We drove from downtown up to Lake Park Bistro. We were going to have lunch there and kind of show them the lake and tour them around Milwaukee a little bit in a car. And we're driving down Lincoln Memorial Drive, and they just couldn't believe it because they're like, this is Baywatch. That's what they kept saying. They said, this looks like Baywatch. The whole beach is packed with all these, college girls in bikinis, and they couldn't believe this is Milwaukee.
Like, yeah, typical March day in Milwaukee,
But
really.
well, anybody who comes to Milwaukee, not anybody, but most people who come to Milwaukee, if they've never been here, the first thing that they just can't believe is there's basically what they perceive as an ocean, right? You can't, this
Can't see
lake,
the
you
other
can't
side.
see,
Exactly,
and they can't believe that we're a city on an ocean, basically. But we're not LA or New York City or Boston or something like that. I mean, it's crazy, and you can get around. I mean, the quality of life is through the roof. It's pretty
crazy.
amazing.
It's
A
great.
lot more affordable than those cities.
Right.
Less traffic. Remember, we have Milwaukee Bucks who won a championship.
Yeah.
Which is a massive draw, and the best player in the NBA. We have a franchise player like Yelich and the Milwaukee Brewers. I mean, we have a lot of assets here.
Absolutely.
And this city, we won like 2 major conventions in a row. People say we're punching above our weight. I don't think we're punching above. I think now you're starting to, 10 years ago, people were like ashamed of Milwaukee. Oh, I'm not, we're not. But now you're seeing Milwaukee home. You're wearing all the Milwaukee gear.
Yeah,
You're more
yeah.
proud of it. That's really the start of like, wow, now we can attract younger, because every young person that was graduating before is like, I have to go to Chicago, Minneapolis, or somewhere else.
Right.
But I see a tide turning for sure.
I think
Yeah.
that was also a little bit of a generational shift too. Like the people who have moved here, transplants appreciate it so much more than a lot of the people who just kind of hung around. And when I moved here in 2002, it was almost this mentality like, well, we don't really want to like be good. We don't want to have like a fancy city. We don't want to be like Chicago or anything like that.
Yeah.
We don't want nice things.
Yeah.
There's this kind of weird mentality. You can sort of sense it. And it's just the weight of people moving in and younger generation coming into positions where they can influence that kind of thing. It just changed it. It's just like a tidal wave.
Yeah, I mean, and I like how you said that though, because when you go into Chicago, you feel like you have to get dressed up because it's a big city and it's glitzy and it's fun. But there's something just almost homey about Milwaukee, right? And so when you come in, and honestly, yes, Carnevor is expensive; it's super high end, but I don't have a dress code there. Come in a t-shirt, come in a hat backwards. I play kind of rock and roll type music. I don't have tablecloth. The whole goal was for that in Third Street Market Hall too is like everybody feels comfortable.
Yeah.
I go to these events and. My wife and I are super simple. We have 6 dogs. I just want to lay around with my dog. Like, I don't like that whole fancy, get super dressed up and be in front of these bougie people. Just simple people. And I think a lot of people in Milwaukee are like that.
Oh, for sure.
And so that's like, with Third Street Market, I'm not just trying to promote my places, but like you come in there, it's busy and it's a cultural melting pot.
It is.
It
It's
really
amazing.
is.
It's
Have people from
very
all
cool.
walks of life where everybody feels comfortable. Families like crazy.
Yes.
I mean, and that was the goal. That's what we wanted to create.
Yeah, it's a definite success.
No, it's like no other place in the city, really.
And a failure to me is like somebody comes in and they don't feel comfortable. I don't feel welcome. I don't feel comfortable. And we try to make everyone in the places feel comfortable.
Well, it's cool in Milwaukee. You can have a place like Carnevor, and it can coexist with a place like Three Brothers. Super funky ethnic food. In a silly little
Totally.
neighborhood, and it just all works.
Totally. I mean, I recognize not everybody can come in a it's expensive, right? I recognize that, but still don't want that hoity-toity type, like,
Right. Well, and it's nice to have a place like that for people who don't do it weekly or monthly, but that special night once a year, it's there.
100%. And that's one customer at a time. Like I used to dress very professional and sharp like you guys. Now I wear t-shirts. Sometimes I just dress down because I don't want to make people, you have to dress like this to come in here.
I have to go to court later, otherwise I'd be dressed like you.
Yeah. Our office is pretty casual. You'd be surprised.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the new norm right now. So.
Well, it really is, especially, Toby always says this. It's like things were sort of trending in a certain way, virtual meetings and more casual environment and work from home and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the pandemic just accelerated it so much. It launched us 10 years, probably before anybody was really ready for it. We're still everyone's trying to figure it out. But,
Yeah.
it changed office culture, it changed work routines, and
Yes.
it's still trying to figure out what the best thing is.
Which you got to kind of like right now, it's like, I know that the younger generation, but also that generation between of kids, because healthcare is expensive. So it's like, hey, I don't want to go to the office every day. So now it's a blend of, eventually leadership and companies you have to come back almost full time because you got to have a culture within a company.
Right.
And the company that had that culture, like I really respect Steve Richmond because there's a culture, boots on the ground, everybody's at work. You have to bounce into one another one's office. Eventually, you're going to have to come back to the office, I think. But then again, I look at this generation that's in high school now. If people right now don't want to go to the office, oh my gosh, is this generation going to want to go to the office?
Yeah.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah, although I wonder if there's going to be a little bit of a reaction where the pendulum goes the other way a little bit because people are going to be hungry for human interaction. You know, they don't necessarily know that they're missing it or how important it really is until they experience it.
I think we're starting to see that. I think we're starting to see a little bit of that, though, for sure, too. You know, because
it's some of the same stuff that we complain about with the social media thing, right? I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. I mean, there's parts of being able to be a remote worker that are attractive even to me. I'm an office guy, though. And as litigators, particularly, we do team-based litigation where you need to be able to pop into each other's offices and bounce ideas off of each other. And I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things that make me think we can't give up that office culture that we had pre-pandemic. But I recognize that both a generation and a post-pandemic group of people say, well, I want more of this remote thing. It's going to be a balance, like a lot of these things. And I'm struggling with what the best result is.
Yeah, no one knows.
it's tough. It's tough. I mean, me, never had an option to work from home.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah,
so,
restaurants are the ultimate in-office only option.
yeah, I mean, but it's also too we want our people in the other companies to come to work. So I can't work from home.
Exactly.
It's never an option. You've got to lead. We have to be there.
That's a
right?
big part
And
of
so-
it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I still put in the hours. I still work late nights. Like it's just like, you know, I'm getting old and tired, but still we have to do it.
Well, why don't we wrap things up? Like Tim said, we don't have a lot of regular segments. We had the overrated, underrated. One other thing we often do is you said you're a big Napa cab guy, but other than that, what is sort of your drink of choice? And being around the hospitality industry, what is the
If
thing
you
that
say
turn
Fernet
to?
Branca, I'm going to leave. I swear to
No,
God.
I'm not going to say that. No, I've been trying to drink less. So now we live half an hour away, and so I'm limiting myself. And you know, there are days you just it's hard when people are buying the wine and you're popping a consulting dinner. But I really just drink wine. So
Okay.
maybe a beer here and there, a little bit of bourbon here and there. Tequila actually gives me a little bit of energy, but I'm the guy that usually wants to be home by 9, 8:30. I'm the guy that wants to be in bed by 10, 10:30. I can't go out and party. I can't.
Yeah, no, there's just age limits on that kind of thing, you know.
I have friends older than me that can stay out all night. I just can't do it. I'm known to do the Irish dip, and you know I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just going to leave
Exactly. You have to. You have to escape.
every single time, and I don't feel bad
the
at all.
gravity of good food and good drink will pull you in. You gotta just jump.
And by the way, I have to get up early and do shit too. So
Yeah, I gotta function on Wednesday morning.
you know, there's a lot of restaurateurs out there. I don't really consider myself. It's hard to say what I do for a living anymore, but you know, it's like some of my team I can't email before. I can't I used to send them emails at 3 and then at 6. And so they think you're crazy, right? And so, but a lot of the team, you know, they just don't get up early, so I can't call them at 6 or 7.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
so restaurateurs are a different breed.
Yeah. No, it's a lifestyle, not a job. Well, thanks so much, man. This is great.
No,
Really
thanks for having
appreciate
me.
you coming in. Yeah,
Absolutely.
bet.
Yeah, thank you, Omar. Great.
So next step, let's drink some wine.